Thank you for listening to Scandinavian Crimes Podcast. Be sure to check out the episode links and be part of our other social media platforms where you can leave a topic suggestion or even share some of your insights regarding the subject matter of the episode. We will always do our best to provide a well-researched episode, but sometimes due to limited access to information and translation issues, some information can be lost. It is therefore good to do your own research and get a deeper understanding of a case of your own interest. So with that all said, let us start today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of Scandinavian Crimes. My name is Devante, and say hello to my lovely co-host,
Hi.
Delila. And on this podcast, we will cover famous Scandinavian criminals who made their mark throughout Scandinavian history. So what's interesting is we have a very kind of, not necessarily, well, it is gruesome, it is a murder, but a story that is nonetheless shocking and kind of involves a previous case that we covered. And this story kind of takes place on July 12th, 1984, when a Dutch couple was traveling decided to camp by Lake Appojaure, north of Sweden. Now, one of the biggest questions many people ask is who could have done such a merciless act? What were their motives? And we will dive into the details of what truly happened, or at least what is publicly known about what's going on with that case and the summer night, and who the suspects could potentially be. So sit back and kind of go grab your tea, grab your snacks, and this is the story of the Appojaure tent murders. Marinus and Jenny Stegehis were a Dutch couple in their 30s who had been married for 13 years with no children. They were a quiet couple who both loved to travel and enjoyed exploring nature. For 3 years, they saved up to go on a big camping trip to Norway, Sweden, and then later Finland. Jenny kept a diary of their travels and recorded their movements through the whole entire trip. After enjoying their trip, it was time to head back to the Netherlands. It was at this point that this beautiful trip would turn into some of the most horrifying scenes you've ever seen. Driving from Finland, they'd enter the north of Sweden and continue their travel south. Unfortunately, their car, a green Toyota Carina, stopped functioning properly. They couldn't risk getting stuck on the road and they tried to find a mechanic nearby. They arrived at a Kiruna where they found a mechanic who was able to repair their car. The issue seemed to be only the condenser, so while the car was being repaired, they spent the night in a Vintage in a nearby town. On the morning of Thursday, July 12th, they refueled at the gas station south of Kiruna and continued further south. They drove for about an hour and decided to stop at Lake Appojaure, which was close to the town of Delila and Jokkmokk. They found a good and quiet camping spot isolated from people. After they set up their tent, they drove to the Great Falls National Park and for some sightseeing around 4:30 p.m. and returned at 7 p.m. for some dinner. It looked like it was about to rain, so after they had eaten, they quickly went to their tent to sleep. As they were sleeping, they were stabbed through their tent by an unknown assailant and left to die. The rain washed away any crucial evidence like footprints and other DNA samples left behind by the killer. On Friday the 13th at 9 p.m., a family of 3 from Gothenburg found the dead couple and reported it to the police. They left the crime scene and drove to the nearest neighborhood to borrow a phone because back in those days, there was no cell phones. The police received a call at 10 p.m. and arrived at the crime scene at 11:30 p.m. They noticed the car and the Dutch plate numbers. They then started to investigate the collapsed tents and the brown outer canvas and the yellow inner canvas with insect net protection on the inside. They could see that the tent pegs had been pulled up out the ground, which could explain the tent collapsing. There are holes in the tent, which seems to suggest that someone stabbed them through the tent multiple times. Under the collapsed tent, we find both Marinus and Jenny, both in their sleeping bag. Technicians found Jenny had 20 cut wounds in total, of her clothes being filled with blood. She had a severe wound on her shoulder and a lot of blood in her mouth. She also had several cuts in her torso. Based on the locations of the wounds, it shows that she moved a lot during the attack compared to Marinus being he probably got attacked and killed first. Marinus had 25 cuts mainly in his shoulders, neck, and arms. He was also struck in the face with a blunt object and cracked his upper jaw. Marinus had wounds on his right forearm as well as his left hand, indicating that he tried to defend himself. The weapon seemed to be the couple's filleting knife, which had its tip broken. Police had a hard time understanding the attacker's motive and had a couple of theories that quickly got debunked. The couple only passed through the area. They didn't meet anyone nearby, hence why they thought it could have been a personal revenge murder. It couldn't have been sexual either due to Jenny having her clothes on and no internal damages or signs of rape. Though they thought of a robbery at first, but it didn't seem like much had been stolen. Their passports and money were untouched. However, they could not find Jenny's handbag and portable cassette player. One of the 2 cameras they had with them was also missing. They therefore concluded that it was a random murder with no motives. 10 days after the murder, Jenny's handbag was found near the village center of Renhagen, about 11 miles south of the crime scene. It was found inside another bag which did not belong to the murdered couple. It was also found quite close to the road, which could have been thrown from a moving vehicle. A year later, on May 27, 1985, the portable cassette player was found near Vitangi, 10 miles north of the crime scene. It was there where the couple spent the night before leaving for Lake Appojaure. It is unclear if it was stolen while they were at Vitangi, if it was forgotten by the couple, or if it was planted there to confuse the investigators. They found fingerprints on both cassette players and Jenny's handbag. The police used Jenny's diary to track the couple's last day. They were able to find eyewitnesses and saw them refuel their car in Skalo on Thursday the 12th, but that was the last time the couple had been seen alive. The investigators suspected that the perpetrator could be a local citizen due to the evidence's location being near the crime scene. With so little evidence and eyewitnesses to go off of, the police asked the people of Gallivare to report any suspicious behavior by familiar people. They also warned tourists to be careful and not to camp in isolated spots. The people of Gallivare had issues with foreign tourists in general and wanted to protect the area from mass tourism and commercialization. The police, however, didn't see this as an issue or even a motive for the murder. There was no evidence that the couple came into contact with anyone during their stay at Gallivare, nor caused conflict so strong that someone would want them dead. In 1993, almost 10 years later, a person contacted authorities and notified them that he had the couple's camera bag with the label Stegius on the inside of it. He had purchased it in the fall of 1984 from a street seller. They tracked down the seller to find out that he had a memory of selling the bag, but no recollection of where the bag was from. The police had a hard time finding people who were close to the crime scene at the time of the murder. Tourists mostly passed by or stayed shortly to continue their travels, which made it hard to pinpoint anyone who could have been potentially an eyewitness or a suspect. On the 16th of July, police stopped a 33-year-old West German boxer who was cycling through the area. He was cycling on the Porges Road, which is south of the campsite, on his way to Gallivare. He had a strong figure with light luggage and barely any identification. He also had some criminal records and was well known by the West German police. However, witnesses saw him at another location at the time of the murder, and he was cleared of suspicion. Another suspect was a 28-year-old nicknamed the Bodybuilder and was known for his violent temper due to his consumption of alcohol, drugs, and anabolic steroids. On top of that, he had been convicted of fraud, illegal possession of firearms, maltreatment, corruption, and larceny. A couple of days after the murder, 2 witnesses reported to the police that the bodybuilder, a woman, and 2 friends set up camp for a night near Lake Appojaure. There was a heated argument and the bodybuilder stormed off. After some time, he returned with blood on his clothes and a knife. He stated that he killed a wild reindeer, and his friends then left the subject, afraid to question him any further. The bodybuilder eventually ended up in prison for another case. The cellmate informed the police that he had confessed to the murder of the Dutch couple. It seemed like the bodybuilder wanted to kill his friends and accidentally got the wrong tent, ending up murdering the Dutch couple. The police could not find enough evidence for these accusations. The bodybuilder denied murdering the couple and felt that the police and witnesses exaggerated his temper and unjustifiably used his past history of crimes as evidence. He was taken in for questioning on several occasions and was monitored for a decade after the double murder. In 1996, he committed suicide by chopping off his forearm and bled to death. Another suspect was Johnny Fairbrink, who was a local criminal known for being a violent drug addict with a long criminal record. The seller who sold the Dutch couple's camera bag had a connection to Fairbrink where he used to buy drugs from him in the past. However, the seller kept telling the police that he did not receive the bag from him. In 1994, the police received a confessional statement from Thomas Quick, a patient at the Sater Institution for the Criminally Insane. Thomas Quick was diagnosed with several mental disorders throughout his life, including borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and psychotic disorder. He also experienced hallucinations and delusions and was heavily medicated and had an addiction to substances. Quick's usual victims were young boys, and for him to murder a stray couple is very different from his usual targets. Despite all of this, the police could not ignore his confessions and decided to interrogate him with the help of his psychiatrist. When Quick told the story, he changed the narratives many times and vaguely answered the interrogator's questions. There were times when he said some very accurate information that only the murderer would know, or at least the person who had seen the crime scene would know, but there are many times that the story did not make sense at all. Quick was able to draw an accurate image of the crime scene with the correct location of the tent, road, lake, and car. He claimed that on July 12, 1984, he was in Jokkmokk, and when he was in Jokkmokk when he met the Dutch couple. They talked and he received the information about where they would be camping for the night. He also met his accomplice, Fairbrink, the guy police tried to connect to the camera bag. Quick also said that he stole a bicycle and drove to the campsite. What she said, drove. Quick first said he stole the bicycle and rode to the campsite. He changed the story to that he rode the bicycle with Fairbrink to the location of the couple. Quick also stated that once he attacked the couple alone and talked to them before he murdered them, then changed it to say Fairbrink was the aggressor and initiated the murder. He lifted a heavy object and attacked the tent, while Quick went inside the tent to attack with a knife. Quick also stated that he stabbed Jenny 9 times and Marinus 5 times. He also fought with Jenny outside the tent for 10 minutes before she died. After the murder, Fairbrink took her camera bag. The weapon used was Quick's and Fairbrink's knife as well as the couple's knife, which makes these 3 weapons involved. To make this all clear, no evidence backed up Quick's story, especially it was very unreasonable on the contrary. It was conflicting in many ways and only had shreds of truth. Jenny's diary states no travels to Jokkmokk. They were also careful due to the car issues and did not want to drive further than necessary. For Quick to use a bicycle from Jokkmokk to Appojaure campsite would have taken him at least 4 hours one way. He would then have to commit the murder and then bike back, which did not make any sense to do in one day, especially during the rain. Police managed to find the report of the stolen bicycle on the 16th of July, but they still were not sure if it was specifically Quick who stole it due to lack of evidence. But in Quick's story, it was not stated how he murdered them in detail. Quick was also unable to describe the tent's color correctly and changed his statement later on, saying the rain cover could have changed his perception of the accurate color. His description of the victims was also wrong, as well as the knife's handle's cover. He also stated that Jenny was naked from the waist up, but later changed his statement to her being fully clothed. Quick's description of the murder and how it was done was very contradicting to the detectives and forensic findings. Now, despite all the ways that he said that he attacked Jenny and her husband, it was very clear that Quick did not really know what happened in that crime scene. Based on what we know about Quick in the current story today, it seems like a lot of this information was coercion based on the detectives and their desire to find someone responsible for the murder. When they interrogated Fairbrink, he denied being involved in the murders or ever meeting Quick. With further investigation and evidence of Fairbrink's innocence, the police decided on October 1995 that Fairbrink had no involvement in the murder and was free of charge. In an effort to do that, they reconstructed the murder scene and let Quick demonstrate the attack. Quick cooperated and gave detailed descriptions of the attack the same way he did during the investigation, with no new information added. When he showcased the attack, he then stated it was wrong and that he would like to redo the demonstration. The second demonstration showed a more accurate resemblance of the evidence and made more sense than his earlier demonstration of the situation. With the second version of the reconstruction, the police felt confident that Quick was the perpetrator. In court, only the second version of Quick's reconstruction was presented on January 1996. The Gallivere District Court sentenced Quick for murder and ruled that he should remain in legal psychiatric care at Satara Institution for the Criminally Insane. In 2001, a new psychiatrist at the clinic stopped Quick's drug prescription. Without his medications, he stopped cooperating with the police and was silent for 7 years. He later retracted his confession to the Appojaure murders. In 2008, Quick stated that all of his confessions were made up during his interrogations. They fed him with information and led him to false confessions. The reason Quick wanted to confess was for the fame and attention while continuing to get medication. He was only good at describing the crime scenes due to his huge interest in unsolved murders. He was highly knowledgeable and read a lot about it in newspaper and books and true crime novels. The convictions against Quick were heavily criticized for their lack of evidence, and on the 30th of July in 2013, he was acquitted for the tent murders in Appojaure. In March 2014, Quick was released from Sattar after 23 years. Swedish police did reopen the case into the murders of Marinus and Jenny, and it's still open until this day. So far, it was a random, unprovoked attack, in all probability committed by someone unknown to the victims. And this was the story of the Appojaure tent murders. So, I've already said this in the Thomas Quick episode, so obviously, my explanation and kind of my part at least will be pretty slow before, well, not necessarily slow, it'll just be a little short compared to, I guess, in response to whatever, you have to say, Delila. But, like I said, I can tell already that outside of the murders, don't get me wrong, it was very heinous, it was very cruel because this couple did nothing wrong. I can tell already that they had their preconceived notions about people, because even when it came to the dude with the steroids, there was no evidence to suggest that he actually did anything, or at least not enough evidence. But then they already had this preconceived notion about who he was and what he did without proving it. Now, I don't know if it was him or not, but the point I'm making is they did not use evidence, or they didn't even really try and investigate. Even throughout most of this story, you will see that there was very minimal mention of actual investigation, and more of it had to do of interrogation, meaning they were probably trying to coerce more people, especially during the time of like the 1980s and even the 90s and before that. There was very minimal investigation. People took people at their word when it came to confessions. They would beat people into confessions. They would torture them. They would starve them. They would deprive them of water for several days to get the confessions that they want. And innocent people would confess. And even till this day, we're actually getting more and more exonerations of people who were falsely put behind bars because of confessions that were tortured. So I say all that to say, once again, this is another example of how some police officers are not properly doing their job. They're not investigating the way they were supposed to. Do I think they're better at it today? Of course, but it still happens. And definitely back during this time, it was very prevalent that police did very minimal investigation. They only took people at their word, and they only wanted to do it based on what they felt was right, and that was simply through interrogation and torture and leading people to confessions and manipulating people who were mentally vulnerable, which Thomas Quick was. He suffered from multiple psychological issues, and they manipulated him in ways and led him to the answer, especially because we have the information that there were several times he was completely wrong, but they waited until the one time after they fed him some information that he was right. And to them, they consider that good police work, when in reality that's not good police work. That you just falsely led someone to a claim, and that's it. And when you put people in the right conditions, no matter who you are, no matter how strong your will is, especially if they're starving you of food and they're depriving you of water, you will eventually break, because your body needs food, it needs water, and you'll say anything to get what you need in order to pretty much feel like you're still living and not dying. And sometimes they full-blown torture you. They'll beat you. And it's happened before, a couple cases with the I forget the name of the case directly, but the case that we talked about after the Redegaard case, where there were some instances where they were full-blown torturing people just to get confessions, and then it didn't work out the way that they had planned. So that's kind of what I have to say about it. Delila, you can go ahead and kind of talk about your part, and I'll respond based on that. But what I think is pretty much in conjunction with the whole Thomas Quick case in the first place.
Okay, so this is the reason why I do not camp in the woods, because this whole thing just sounds like a scary movie, and this is the reason why I don't want to do that. In the woods, it's dark. No, I don't want to do that. I know it's it would have been more natural, for people to actually die by, animals or wildlife, nature, murder back then, especially in the tourist area or like in the woods like that never happened. Like that was the thing that really did not happen. Just to give you guys a little bit of an understanding, but like at least in Sweden, but like I think it's would apply for also like the whole Scandinavia in general, but most of the Swedish people, they know how to camp. Like they do that regularly as an activity whenever they can, even though like even the people who live in the big cities as well. So it's a very normal and thing to do. So for this to happen was very like unusual and scary to many people, and it made like headlines everywhere and across Europe, not only in like Sweden and Scandinavia, but like across Europe. And it was scary for everybody. And you know, it used to be a safe place, and people got scared and you know, didn't want to travel that much anymore. So I just want to say some tips as well that I think is important for those who camp. Like, you have to be safe. Don't go to like isolated places. Try to be close to other people. Like not too close, obviously, but like be around people so that, you know, if something happened, you have witnesses in some way. Preferably, I would have liked to be close to families or like women, because I don't know, I'm a woman. I feel safe with women. That's me. And usually if it's like really like during the midsummer, it's usually like bright and light 24 hours. So there will be like more witnesses for people, like more people will be able to see better because it's light outside. And also the murderer wouldn't have felt comfortable probably to do it in like such scenarios that this murder happened in. So I just feel like just to be more safe. There usually are campsites where you have people around you. I know it can be annoying to be like with families and kids and you know, like I think that it's better to be safe than sorry. That's what I'm trying to say. But I guess we can go and talk about the suspects. I think that's a really interesting part of this whole thing. I believe it's the bodybuilder. I don't know what you believe, Devante, but like I believe it's the bodybuilder.
I mean, it's really tough to really figure out who it is because the police didn't do their job. So I'm running on very limited information. True. So, I mean, it very, very much could have been the bodybuilder because he did end up killing himself. And I don't know if that was out of guilt or just the accusations itself ruined his reputation to the point where people didn't see him as human, because that happens as well. But just in general, it's really hard to tell in this case because there's not even sufficient evidence to prove or disprove anything that they've came up with. The only thing we know is that the bodybuilder killed himself, and the only thing we know as well is that Thomas Quick, we know, was acquitted for this crime and a couple other crimes that he was blamed for because of his mental state at the time during this case. So I couldn't even tell you. I usually you know me, I love theories, and even if it's outlandish, even if it's something that might suggest, but I mean, I can understand why you said it's the bodybuilder, because they did make a point that he was on anabolic steroids at the time.
He was also intoxicated, and he also allegedly confessed to his cellmate and stuff as well. So it's like, it also that he had a lot of blood, he had a knife, and like, I don't know, it just sounds like it could be him, but he's the closest one out there.
Yeah, so it's I can understand why you would say that, but like I said, in terms of me mentally,
you need more evidence and more.
It's just I need more evidence because, you know, one, they were camping, so it is entirely possible that maybe he could have actually killed a reindeer or something like that. It's possible, and so I'm like, that's not too far fetched. Now, they didn't even investigate whether or not that was true. But that's kind of my point, where it's like it's definitely fishy and convenient. You know, they weren't terribly far, but also he was on foot. If I remember correctly, he didn't really you know, he wasn't like close enough where like walking, I think, would be like absolutely
they didn't really
convenient.
specify where he kind of were in the, like, if they were close by or if they were like far away, I would say.
Yeah.
But they said that it was like around the area, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm assuming if they tried to make that connection, that it's possible that he was at least, this is my, you know, going off for New York minutes, that at least he might have been like 30 to 40 minutes walking away from them if they were trying to make that connection.
The only thing that witnesses said was like he was walking, who was it? They said that he was gone during the time of the murder. That's the only thing they said. So we can't really know if, you know, the timing and everything specifically. But I can say this. The only reason that I kind of suspect him is because he came back and he, like, only because what the witnesses said, basically. And as you said, Devante, we need more evidence. Most of the evidence got washed away with the rain, footprints and such as well. So we can't really, like, and also the police didn't do everything they could have done. So it's like, I get it. I only go based from the witnesses, and I feel like, yeah, he could have been, he's the only one who could have done it. But oh yeah, you also said something about the suicide. I wanted to say something about that. I didn't put it like in the script thing, but he apparently, one of his like cellmates or friends said that the reason he committed suicide was because he felt like he was being targeted by everybody, that he actually did something that he didn't do. So like,
yeah, so basically,
yeah, he felt like, yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to clarify that as well, that, you know, I don't like, the only reason I think it's about Delila is because of what the witnesses said and based on his like personality that they described him. But he could have been, as you also say, that he could have been innocent, you know, and being portrayed this monster by his friends and witnesses, which he isn't, you know, which he could have not been as well. So I get it.
I did mention too, well, obviously I already mentioned it, but the reason why I say like this whole thing with the bodybuilder is really iffy is because the police definitely made a point to investigate people who had like criminal histories. So they already had a preconceived bias about, okay, it has to be someone who has a criminal record already. There's no way this can be someone who's never been caught or who's never been arrested, even though statistically, when it comes to like, you know, serial killers and like even murders like this, there's still a decent chance they've never been arrested before. Based on, obviously back then they didn't know that. Yeah. So I'm like, it's entirely possible. But they just had these preconceived notions about people, and they assume like, oh, they're criminal, or they used to buy drugs, or they used to do this, like they must be a suspect. But then they never, like I said, validated any of their claims. They just assumed, and they just stopped there because the case is still open to this day, and nothing. It's been like what, 40 years, something like that, or close to 40 years. So it's like, yeah, they just made an assumption, and then they didn't investigate as best as they could, and unfortunately we're still in this position. So that's my whole situation with that. And in terms of, you know, like I said, the bodybuilder, and how they just did a poor job. I
feel like, I don't know if they actually did take fingerprints and stuff, because they had the cassette fingerprint.
They did mention it, yeah.
They did, yeah. Okay, so because I was like, they didn't find anybody that matched the fingerprints on the cassette player till this day. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think it's like, it could be a local, as they also suspected, because everything was like nearby. It could have been a stranger just passing by and just was like, okay, after the murder, just went to another location. Obviously somebody would run away from the crime scene, right? Because
they said it was a tourist spot as well.
I understand like it's hard to find based on it being close to the road and like people could easily just, you know, run away from the crime scene. But something that I wanted to mention about the local suspects, or like it being somebody living nearby, is that they did not like tourists. And I'm a little bit shocked that the police was like, oh, but it could have been them because that's not a good enough motive. And I'm like, well, we don't really know the people there. I'm not saying like they have someone. I mean, like maybe someone who had maybe some type of mental disorder, who thought that it would be justified to kill and murder a tourist so that they would be scared to go there, you know. But I feel like they just kind of like, you know, people wouldn't do that here, and kind of shrugged it off, which I think, you know, is a bit weird in a way. But and also they couldn't really investigate everybody, so they kind of just like, okay, if you guys think somebody is like somebody who's a suspect, or if you suspect anybody, just report it to us. And I felt like, you know, I don't know, I feel like the police didn't do a good job there either. They kind of just like, oh, you know, it could be someone local, but let's just not do any thorough search or anything.
Yeah, well, that's why I say in this case, like, it is heinous, obviously, because the couple didn't do anything. But most of the problem with it, if not entirely all of the problem, outside of the killer itself, is just simply that there's no way for us to even guesstimate who could have been. The police didn't do their job, and it was just like we're right back in the same situation with that whole Thomas Quick episode that we did, where most scenarios in which he was prosecuted with other cases, they just assumed it was him because of his mental state and his history, which, like I said, history has proven that's not always the case. So, you know, it's you know, as much as we want to spin back and forth about this, and as interesting and kind of gruesome the case is, it's like
there's so many things that we can't
they
really
didn't do their jobs.
Determine because there's like
we can't even guess because there's too many holes, and not even holes at this point. There's no case.
I just wanted to point out regarding Thomas Quick. We did do an episode of him, but I'm just gonna say a couple of things. Like, he was basically drugged throughout the whole period. He was good with lying, and he had a lot of crime knowledge, making it easy for him to kind of like understand the questioning that the police did and kind of navigate through it. And the reason he wanted to confess to as many crimes as he possibly could was because he wanted to be famous. That's the whole point. Or like, he wanted to have that attention. And as soon as you know, he stopped with the drugs and everything, well, not him stopping the drugs, but his psychiatrist stopped giving him drugs, he started to clear up and realizing like, oh my gosh, what is this, what's going on? So I'm not gonna talk too much about Thomas Quick, because we already made a whole episode about him. I just want to say, like, it's not fair. We already know his situation, and you know, I don't think it's fair that they used the second version of the reconstructed crime scene thing without mentioning the first one that he kind of just like failed with, basically. So, you know, I think it's unfair that they just based everything based on what he said rather than having any evidence as well. But anyways, we all know that well, anyways, we kind of see this trend where like police investigators in the 70s and 80s were just like not doing a proper job, and most of the cases are very questionable in a way as well. And this is not only in Sweden, I mean like in generally in like Scandinavia. But you know, luckily with new technology, education, research, we can be critical with past cases and also even be able to solve them years later. And I'm glad that experts and people involved in these cases have been critical and also wanting to solve it in a way in today's society. I think that's really good. I think it's great. And I think that's really good. That's why we're able to have these discussions and like talk about these cases as well. But I want to ask a thing to the audience, like, who do you think is the murderer with all the evidence that we have currently today? If you want to, feel free to like tell us on Discord or social media, and we would love to hear more about that. Also, feel free to listen to our episode, The Confessions of Thomas Quick. So we talk about more details of everything that happened in his life, and also the cases and such, and the miscarriage of justice towards him. And if you want to listen to something that is similar to this case, be sure to listen to the episode of the Unsolved Murders of Lake Appojaure. It's a really interesting case.
Well, yeah, guys, just hopefully you enjoyed today's podcast. Like I said, the story itself was a little longer than usual, but not by too much. But unfortunately, there's
a lot of details and stuff that is like, a
lot of details, but none about the case itself, and more about how poorly the police handled the case. But let us know what you think in the comments of, whether it be the podcast itself, whether it be on our social media accounts. And remember to go follow us on like Twitch as well, because we will, after the end of this first season, we will go and do live shows and kind of talk and communicate with you guys and go over interrogations, go over cases, case files, all that stuff. So go do that. And like I said, reach out to us on social media, whether it be Facebook. Facebook is the best because it has Messenger built in on the Scandinavian crimes page. So when you hit up the page, we both receive it. So you will probably be having a conversation with one of us. So either way, hope you enjoyed it. I hope the story was, I hope it warns you to be just a little careful, be mindful of your surroundings, be mindful of, when you're going out on trips. Even though we live in the modern age, whether you go camping or not, things still happen, and just be precautious. Take the time to prepare, because it's never, don't think of it as like, the chances of something happening, but think of it more like, what if that one time you don't prepare, something happens, then unfortunately it could end up costing you or your loved ones their life. And obviously I don't want you to go. I want you to be here. I enjoy the time that we spend together. So of course, be careful. Yes. And how are we going to end it today with today's food options? Let me see. I am going to go, well, since it's getting warm, my cravings are changing a little bit. So I want to take a page out of your book. I can go for like a nice grilled chicken Caesar salad, I'm going to go with couscous with peas, and also obviously seasoning, tzatziki, and chicken with some hummus on the side with red, and also some red onion. That sounds interesting. And just to let the world know, good. Today, well, in general, I do cook, but today I made the most fantastic tasting burger I've probably ever made. But just wanted to let y'all know that, so that way,
Good job, American.
Wow, that's crazy. Anyways, we will catch you guys next time. Peace out.
Bye.